Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Welcome along to episode number 31 of Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. Thanks a lot for taking the time to stream or download us. We really appreciate every single one of you listening to our podcast every 3 weeks. And here, as usual, it's me, Dave D.
And me, Dave B.
And we'll be guiding you through all things craft beer for the next hour or so. Got lots coming up for you, including an interview with somebody I tracked down at the Craft Theory Festival in Reading recently. We've got James on from Wilderness Brewery in Powys in Wales. Really looking forward to that. And what else have we got, Dave?
So, following on from our last episode when we announced that our sponsors Hall are just on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment, there's no drink along, but don't worry, we have filled the gap rather nicely, hopefully, with the latest in our One Hop Wonders series, where we sample a couple of single hop beers to see what we're getting out of those and learn a bit while we're doing it. And this time it is Simcoe. We also have Hyper Tripe, which features old favourites Cloudwater, who have definitely done at least 2 of these, I believe, now. And that is a tipper. Not many of those about now. We'll talk about that a bit more when we get to Hyper Tripe. That's going to be in focus. And of course, for every episode, as we normally do, we start with Brew to Me, don't we, Dave?
We do indeed. We each take a beer from a brewery we haven't tried before. Sometimes it's a brewery we've never even heard of before, but we've tracked them down. Sometimes it's a brewery we just haven't, for some reason, had one of their beers. But whatever it is, it's a brewery we haven't sampled before, and we get one of their beers and see what they're like. And Dave usually starts his feature off. Over to you, Dave. Who is your Brew to Me candidate this time?
It is Moot Brewing Company, or Moot Brew. And they are based in Rochester. There didn't seem to be too much about them that I could find online. I sort of read a bit of blurb on their website and everything, got in touch and sort of explained who I was, what I was hoping to do. I think I saw one of their cans available to buy somewhere, but couldn't really see anything else. So I got in touch with them. And Patrick at Moot Brew has been very, very friendly. They were just brewing when I got in touch with the beer I'm about to try, which is called Butter, a dipper. But I got a couple of those and a couple of another beer. But more importantly, Dave has gone the colour of the staggeringly good beer that we had last time, the green, because I also got a free T-shirt. So he's very envious of my new Moot merch.
Look at him. Next thing you'll tell me you've got a glass as well.
No glass.
That'd be the ultimate dagger in the heart if you've got glassware as well. And we should say that Moots are actually really, really new to the scene, aren't they?
Yeah, really, really new. As I say, I think they've only got 2 beers out at the moment. The dipper is sort of a matter of weeks old.
Now, I bumped into Rob from This Week in Craft Beer recently, and he was really, really keen on Moot, and also really keen on this dipper that you're about to try.
Well, the nose on it is really powerful. It's a good 6 to 8 inches away from me, and I can really smell all the fruit coming out of it. So we got Motueka, Cryo Yukino, Cryo Mosaic, and Sabro. So
wow.
No wonder I can smell it. There's a couple of hops in there, which I'm not wild about at times. But anyway, they say it gives a punch on the nose, definitely, of fresh strawberries with a hint of coconut, citrus, and mango. The palate is soft, thick, fruity, and slightly sweet and creamy, backed up by a kick of bitterness from Fuggles. There's lactose in this as well. And I'll now show you it, Dave.
Wow.
It's a big old thick milkshake, isn't it? This is back to the juice days.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You don't really come across that many dippers with lactose in them.
No, not really. Oh, blimey. That is a bit of a trip back to the old school. If you've sort of been drinking craft beer for a few years, that's a bit of a throwback beer.
Obviously in a good way, by the look of your face.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a really favourable comparison I can give it. It is a bit, when everyone was just doing Juicy Boys.
Juice bomb that.
Exactly, and that was the thing. There is that hit of the bitterness from the Fuggles, actually, which is really nice. It levels it right off, so I want to go back to it again. The Yukino's there, the Sabro's there, but it's not that much, which is great. It is fruity. It's more that sort of Polly's taste, I think. I think that's what I'd say. The original ones, before that, like the real original canned ones, the Loca Polly stuff, I would say.
Well, I'm sure Moot would be absolutely delighted to be compared with a brewery like that at such an early stage.
No, this is good. There's nothing to get offended about here. It's 7.6%. We said in a couple of episodes ago, didn't we? You don't see that many dippers at the moment.
That sounds, like you said, like a bit of a throwback to a couple of years ago with craft beer, but with a bit of a modern twist on it, with that bitterness coming in at the back.
And it's also not super, super thick. even though there's lactose in, which I don't mind. It's thick enough for sure, but at the end, it's thin isn't fair, but it's not sort of all the way through, so it gets really, really sort of almost sickly.
The thing is, when it is thick all the way through, it can become a bit of a chore to actually get all the way through it, especially if it's a 440.
No, this will go down very easily. I mean, as you say, it's not usually the kind of thing you want as your first beer of the day, but I'm happy to make exceptions. And no, that's lovely. That's big thumbs up. Very happy indeed.
Well, what is interesting here is that when Dave cracks open a beer, the first thing he does is he gives it a smell. Sometimes he pulls a bit of a face, then he'll have a little sip, and then sometimes he pulls an even bigger face then, in a bad way. But there was none of that. This was smiles all the way, so that's high praise indeed. Now, I just want my Brew to Me candidate to be equally as good. So you've had a new brewery on as your Brew to Me, and I've got a relatively new brewery as well. Only brewed their first beer at the start of this year in January, and it is Other World Brewing, who are based in Dalkeith in near Edinburgh. And this was another beer that I picked up while I was at Finefest from the Oban Beer Cellar. So they released their first beer in January. They've now made 15 different beers.
Wow.
And a few rebrews as well. So they're going great guns, first half of the year, 15 beers. And what I've got is a grapefruit and talus hazy pale. Now, we've had a bit of talus, Dave, so we know exactly in our minds what we think this should taste like. It's 4.2%, and I'm really quite looking forward to it. My first beer for a couple of days.
It does feel a very good beer for this great British summer. It's poured grapefruity in colour, I would say. Yeah. That's not as hazy as I thought it might be.
Well, let's give it a go. Oh, my goodness. Our first experience of talus was with a Copper Beach beer, wasn't it? And we loved it. Family Tree. And goodness me, this is a great hop, isn't it? It's very fruity. You can get that grapefruit as well, but not in a bitter way. That's nice. That is very, very drinkable. They say it's a sessionable, natural, fruit-filled pale, loaded with fresh grapefruit zest and juice for a zingy, bright, and refreshing beer. I would say every one of those points is bob on.
When you say grapefruit juice in a beer, I automatically think of Brewdog's Elvis juice. Now, I know they've changed the recipe of that because I happen to have one 6 to 8 months ago, or maybe a bit sooner than that. It's dreadful now. Like, it doesn't taste of grapefruit at all. It doesn't really taste of anything, but it really used to. That used to be its big thing. Is this not similar, but do you get a real big hit of grapefruit juice?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's right there. So that's good. And they've made a whole range of beers, not just hazy pales. They've done some sours. One of the most popular beers is a smoked Scottish lager, which sounds right up your street, actually.
Yeah, that really does. I think that's a resounding hit for both of these then, which is really nice.
Isn't it good, we've found 2 new breweries here that have only started this year, and both of them already are making great beers. And
it just shows that there is still that scope to hopefully get into the market and carve your niche out and get some sales and get a following and make a go of it and do something you love, because there's always room for good beer, I would say.
You're listening to Dave B and Dave D on Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
So they've already heard me mention on the podcast that I went to the Craft Theory Festival in Reading recently, and there was about a dozen different breweries there, one of which was Wilderness from Wales. And I got chatting to James, who is the founder, the brewer, everything, and here he is to talk to us now. How about that? How you doing, James?
Very well, thank you.
Well, this is the fastest turnaround ever. I only met you for the first time a few days ago, and now you're on the podcast. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's mad. Eh? Thanks very much for having me.
Your beers are obviously right at my streaks. I love my sours, my wild stuff, and so it's absolutely ideal for me what you do. So how long have you been going for then? That's where we should start, I guess.
I guess we got started 2018 or so. So did the first few brews, then my little one came along. So I sort of had a little bit of time off. So we sort of got started, I guess, properly in sort of 2019. So a lot of the beer we do is aged. So it's actually quite nice to almost get going actually with a little bit of beer that had been aging for a little while. So I guess overall about 3 and a bit years either side of a global pandemic.
Oh, exactly, which took a good couple of years out of it. So where did you start? Where was the brewery and where is the brewery?
So the brewery's in a little town called Newtown in mid Wales. I was looking for somewhere to sort of set the brewery up, and that was a nice little sort of market town with some available industrial units. And I was like, well, this'll do me to start. And it's been it's been ideal.
And have you been in the unit from the very start then?
Yeah, that's right. So, I wasn't sort of a home brewer or anything before. I've always worked in breweries. So I sort of went into it with my eyes open, if that makes sense. So I knew that I sort of, what sort of size unit I needed and what sort of kit I wanted to get.
Full pelt.
Yeah.
Straight
so
in.
we're definitely outgrowing that unit now.
So what sort of size is the current kit then?
So it's a 5-barrel kit. So we're brewing about sort of 800 litres a time. I probably brew once a fortnight or so. But then that will get split into, it'll either be sort of a fresh beer or it'll get split into some of our barrels. So we have about 30 or so, mainly wine barrels, mainly red wine barrels.
That's a fair amount, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot to wrangle on your own.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
Yeah, so then the beer goes in there and then each barrel may become its own beer or may become part of a blend, or I never necessarily have a plan for what's going to happen to each barrel because, what happens in each one is sort of inherently unpredictable, and I'm brewing something, it'll get split into 4 or so, and then...
It's a totally different ballgame to a brewery that says, okay, today we're going to brew a lager. You know what you're going to get at the end of it, don't you? But you don't know.
No, and it's an absolutely terrible business decision. I can't defend it in any way. It's ridiculous. It's the sort of thing I always wanted to do, and I love the fact that I don't really know what's going on. So tomorrow I am brewing a saison type beer, but literally because I've got 4 barrels that need filling up, I'm going to brew that. That's going to go in the barrels, but I've got no plan for it, what it's going to be sold as or released as, when that will be available to the public. It's very much just a case of, okay, I've got 4 barrels. What would go nicely in them? Okay, here we
This
go.
man has the most ideal job in the world, Dave. Just rocks up to his unit, brews whatever he fancies, and see what comes out.
There's 2 things stand out. One, you've worked within the sort of brewing industry for a while, and I'd be fascinated to find out where you've done that to get to this point. And the other bit is you sound like, and whenever we've had previous brewers on, the sort of common denominator we've found is there's definitely an element of mad scientist. And it sounds like you've absolutely got that in spades. And this sounds like it's mad scientist turned up to 11 almost.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm going to do my own thing, and what will be will be.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of like leaning into the fact that it's inherently sort of unpredictable and just sort of, I sort of see my job these days as more like keeping the barrels filled up with hopefully nice beer and then seeing what they turn into. And then at the other end, it's a case of like tasting things, seeing whether they're ready, seeing if they need blending, just as an example. But the beer I'm brewing tomorrow is going to be really, really simple. Pilsner malt, Sarts hops, and Saison yeast. So it'll be, hopefully it would be a nice beer on its own, but it will be relatively sort of straightforward. But then it's going into a set of 4 different red wine barrels, all of which have been recently emptied. So they've got all of the leftover wild yeast, bacteria, the dregs of the last thing. One of them's got the dregs of a fruited raspberry beer in.
So it's just experimentation gone wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is this hence the name as well?
The truthful answer is that I was trying to get my wife to help me come up with a name, and she was going through the dictionary and sort of suggesting things. At some point she said, we're getting near the end of the thing, you're going to have to pick something.
So do all of your beers go into a barrel, or are there some that don't?
No, so some that don't, but the proportion that do go into the barrel is sort of increasing.
Does that annoy you when you can't put one into a barrel?
No, I guess so we do some clean beers,
Right?
And it's just straightforward beers. Like we do a bitter, which this isn't going to sound so straightforward once I start describing it, but is a sort of traditional sort of ordinary bitter. But then we introduce a bit of Belgian yeast as well, and just gives it a little bit more character. I don't know, that's my way of just proving to myself that I can keep the brewery clean enough to do normal beers too. If I want to.
I don't think you can do normal beers.
No, I don't think you can either.
But we do the occasional like sort of petit saison or grisette type thing, which might be a little funky, a little bit bretty. So with a little bit of Brettanomyces yeast as well as saison yeast, but not necessarily barrel aged and not sour or anything, but just
Even now, you sound slightly disappointed with it,
I know,
and
I know.
it just sounds like you want to do a version of that beer with what you're just describing on top as well.
Well, so we did one. In fact, I don't know if Dave got a chance to try this at the Craft Theory, but one of the beers we had on there was a soured pilsner. So that was we did a straight pilsner, a normal pilsner, but then half of it we aged in some Burgundy white wine barrels.
Was that available to take away?
Yeah, it was in bottle as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance we've got that downstairs. Thing,
Oh,
yeah.
amazing! Yeah, so we were really pleased with that one. It's still hopefully recognisably sort of lagery, but with a little white winey edge. Has gone down really well. Apart from the.
So how do these beers go down in Wales? Because I've spent a lot of time in Wales, and
You weren't bumping into a lot of people who wanted
I know.
an aged pilsner.
Is there a big market for your kind of beers in Wales, or are you distributing your beers further afield to people?
Bit of a mix, to be honest. We've got some really good customers in sort of North and South Wales who really take everything we have. We have quite a few customers that just every time we have something new, they're like, yeah, we'll take a couple of cases of that, please. So that's great. That's really nice. And we do the occasional little bit of cask beer, maybe a bitter or something pale over the summer, which is more straightforward. And yeah, they go down really well because we're on a little industrial estate and we have a little shop. It's always nice to have at least one more straightforward thing if someone sort of comes and knocks on the door and say, hey, you're a brewery, can I buy some beer? And not have to explain that everything is really sour and but you'd be surprised really. Every beer we make, we try and make relatively accessible. So even the sour ones aren't face puckeringly.
They're more subtle, aren't they? They're not real in your face kind of sours.
So that's what I like. I like the sourness or the funkiness from the wild yeast as more of a component of it rather than it being the entire flavour, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Lots of people have much more of an open mind than I guess I expected, which is...
Have you seen people's drinking habits change in the few years since you've been going? Are people now more open to trying new types of beers?
Yeah, I think so. I really think so. Over lockdown especially, we were doing quite a lot of mail order. People are happy to try something, a bottle of something, that sounds a bit more out there. And hopefully actually taste-wise isn't too out there, but it might sound it from our descriptions because I'm terrible at descriptions. But it's a different proposition than like a pub buying a 20-litre keg of something. One person buying a can of sort of an aged Belgian pale or something is...
This is probably a really good time to mention the offer on your website where you do 3 750ml bottles with the postage for £36, was it?
I think it's 33 at the moment.
Oh, is it?
It is 33. I've got the website up in the back and I can just see it's 33.
I was happy with 36. 33 is even better. Great.
No, that's quite a nice little selection at the moment. So I try and keep that offer sort of going. The price changes depending on what beers.
If people were ordering that now, what 3 beers would they get?
So we've got a Ruby Belgian table beer in 750. Yeah, it's a fairly malty table beer with sort of Belgian yeast. Not too aggressive, 3.5%. There's a 5%-ish Tempranillo barrel-aged sort of Belgian pale, so lightly sour Belgian pale ale, which is refreshing, but sort of still with a bit of malty interest to it. And then my favourite beer that we do at the moment, which is just a not barrel-aged beer, a 3% Bière de Garde, so just a malty, boozy thing that I think in 750, ideal sort of sharing beer with dinner or something.
The way you've described those beers, that just sounds like, what are you pairing this with when we're eating?
I love a 750 as a measure of beer because it feels just the right amount for 2 people to share. I think beer can be a fantastic thing with food, right?
Absolutely.
And none of those are too aggressive, but they've all got their own character in their own ways. Yes, we try and have that as a little tasting pack. The beers change, the price changes.
That's quite an interesting model, isn't it? 'Cause I've not seen that sort of thing elsewhere on other breweries' websites.
Yeah, we sort of did it because we were getting quite a lot of sort of queries of, I want to buy some of your beers for a friend or for someone, what would you recommend or something? And I just sort of was like, well, if I can put together a little taster pack, and one of our cardboard suppliers sold a nice little 3 wine box shipping pack, so that was ideal.
I've got another point to pick up on talking about boxes. Your environmental aspect to your business.
Yeah, the cardboard boxes we buy generally made of recycled cardboard and stuff, but we buy some really good ones for even for our cans and all our bottles now, they have inserts in which really hold the bottles or cans secure, but they're made of essentially cardboard sort of pulp, so stuff that isn't good enough to be remade into proper paper or cardboard or something, but makes really good little trays or holders or inserts. And then those themselves are compostable at the other end. For us who send out a lot of stuff, it's sort of the best way we've found at the moment to have sort of lower impact.
The amount of cardboard that goes outside the front of my house every 2 weeks for the recycling man is ridiculous. So
yeah,
anything that can be done to help is
well, that's right. And we use, I mean, it's not just because we're cheap, but we generally use unbranded stuff because a lot of the stuff we're selling is sort of sending out to bottle shops and things who might then be doing their own mail order and stuff. So, if they can get another use out of it, then
nice.
Perfect. It just sort of saves, well, hopefully A, it saves them a bit of money, but B, it's just, because recycling's great. If you can reuse it, that's even better, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think I know the answer to this, but people trying to think of, okay, what if I could compare Wilderness to, this sounds like the Little Earth kind of vibe.
Yeah, we're definitely playing in sort of that end of the pool. I love their beers, I really do. They're sort of an inspiration for me getting started as well. I guess, like in general, I'd say their beers are probably a little sort of bolder in flavour, a little bit more on the sour end.
Right.
And,
and
they generally don't do much of the clean stuff.
No.
So it's tricky to find the words. I'm without sounding like I'm in any way criticising them because I'm not. Like I love their beers.
You're kind of in, not that I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're kind of in their ballpark, but doing it your own way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all of their beers, as far as I understand, are fermented with a sort of culture that comes from cider apples and stuff. So they've got their real own flavour and real sort of, it's quite punchy.
Very
it's great.
Loads of tannins. Pretty much every time with them.
Yeah, and I think everything they do is pretty delicious. Yeah, I guess we're a little bit, on average, a little bit less intense. That's just sort of, I guess, more my own personal sort of preference.
So, and a lot of people say this, you're making beers that you like to drink.
Yeah. And I don't see that I can do much else, if that makes sense.
Well, you know exactly how you want them to be because you like to drink them, yeah.
Yeah, there's no point trying to make a massive stout if that's not what you want to drink because you don't have a point of reference, I guess.
No, I mean, saying that, I have got a massive stout in the... let's not worry about that.
Awesome.
No, but it's more, what do I fancy making on any given day, if that makes sense?
I bet that changes a lot with you, with yourself as well.
Yeah, it does. And trying to give myself the freedom to do any style of beer I want to, if I want to. It just happens that most of the things turn out to be palish looking beers, about 5%, that are a little bit sour and a little bit funky. That I then have to try and think of ways to describe to make them sound different.
We should back up here a little bit because Dave mentioned earlier about how you got into the brewing industry and who you worked for previously. So we should just ask you to clarify that, really.
I started back in, I guess, 2010, came out of university. So I was a sciencey boy before.
It's always the way.
Didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I saw a job description for a job advert for a trainee brewer down in Salisbury, Hopback Brewery, who are a fairly big regional brewer, Summer Lightnings, one of the first sort of big nationwide sort of golden beers. Went down for an interview. They seemed really lovely. Roll on, like a couple of weeks later, I was there making 12,000 litres of beer every day, like 6 days a week. And it was amazing. Like, it was the best education I could think of because, we'd probably brew the same beer like 3 days in a row, with loyal drinkers, really loyal drinkers who would, go to the same pub every night, have 4 or 5 pints. They would pick up on any little change. And of course, like, the local pubs all served it. So, I'd often go into the pubs and they might know who I was and people would be like, have you changed something with this one? Or, real deep end education. But it was amazing. It was really, really good. Yeah, then I moved on from there, worked at Howling Hops in East London. Quite a bit bigger now than when I was there, I'm sure. But they've got an amazing sort of well, they call it the Tank Bar in
I've been. I like Howling. I like Howling Hops. I think the setup's awesome. I imagine it's just because perhaps they're in a very congested market in London, but they probably don't quite get the recognition they deserve. I think they actually turn out really, really good beer, which is just sort of filed in better than average.
Yeah, they sell so much on site. I mean, when I was there, we were selling like a third to a half of everything we were making literally on site.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's gone up now because so they're right on the edge of the Olympic Park. And since West Ham have moved there, I think they get really busy.
They get trade from that. Oh, that's interesting.
I think they get a lot. So when I left, the lad who was sort of like, I guess the assistant brewer there took over after I left, and he was amazing. I think he's moved on now, but he really was making some great beer as well. And they definitely, a little bit underrated because, some amazing stuff.
How far back are we going? Because I remember when they did the Shakespeare series. Were you involved with that, or was you gone?
After my time. Yeah. So that was when we were thinking about moving across to this part of the world. So we were living in Cambridge at that time, or just outside. Yeah, we're thinking of moving back to where my wife grew up, which is right on the England-Wales border. I was like, okay, I better think about what I'm going to do for a job. Very kindly, the guys at Salopian Brewery who let me work there part-time while I was setting up.
So you've had quite a solid,
good education,
solid grounding, isn't it?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I mean, it was all no planning involved, but
yeah, the best things often are unplanned. Well, a bit like your beers.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Although you say lucky, but I suspect there's probably a bit of skill involved, and you might be doing yourself down slightly because I don't think you get to go into being all those breweries without being talented at what you do.
I think I'm just very likable. No, I don't know. No, I do feel like I've been very lucky. The thing I was sort of fancied doing, though, was what I'm doing now.
So would you ever aspire to becoming bigger, or are you happy where you are now?
I'm totally happy where I am now.
I mean, that comes across.
It does
so
come
much.
across. Yeah.
The past 2 years, I guess we've done some sort of expanding in a way. So during the pandemic, we bought a canning line, just a really small one, but with some help from the Welsh government and from a bit of crowdfunding, which has just meant I can sort of make more beer or package more beer in less time. So that sort of is a sort of slight expansion for us. And then end of last year, I took Helen on. So they do 1 or 2 days a week for me, and they do sort of sales and marketing and sort of general telling me what to do type stuff. Yeah, and we're trying to expand and grow, but without necessarily making too much more beer.
Yeah.
So when you say expanding and growing, if I was to say, would you like to have a wilderness tap room? Is that too much?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so one day we will probably outgrow the space we're in and have to think about a different space. And if it made sense to do the occasional tap room on a Saturday or something, I guess. But
if I could offer you loads more barrels to put more beers in instead.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Of course you would. Of course.
Yeah. Spending less time packaging gives me a bit more free time to make a bit more beer. And then spending a little bit less time doing we don't do a lot of sort of traditional marketing, but sort of Helen just being a bit more in charge of how we sort of present ourselves and that sort of thing, and just replying to inquiries and all of that sort of thing, again, gives me just a little bit more time to focus on the production side. I guess, our expansion plans are for me just to be able to spend more time doing it.
People can now get hold of your beers on Bruiser as well. How are you finding that?
Yeah, that's really nice, actually. I'm pretty sure we must be one of the smaller breweries on there.
I'd say there's plenty in the same sort of bracket, I would say, because Dave and I are quite interested in brews, and I've got a box coming for the first time in a couple of weeks. I'm really interested to see how it's going to go. But we did see that you were on there as well, so it's quite well timed.
I think I'm going to say we're quite lucky to be on there. But Ollie, one of the founders of Bruiser, happens to live just a few miles down the road from the brewery. So when they were setting up and they'd got their initial breweries signed up for launch, but he popped in one day and said, "Look, you wouldn't happen to just be interested in doing this as well?" And this was before I'd even heard of it, so I was a bit sort of like, I don't know, how much would it be? I don't know, we could spare that much beer or something. And he's like, no, you can just do at your own pace sort of thing.
Nice.
But it's been really nice, and they've promoted us a little bit. again, it's quite similar to the free 750ml bottles tasting box. Yeah, we get to curate a little box each month for people that order it. And because we do some cans, some bottles, I generally just try and put as much as will physically fit in the box and give people a real range of stuff.
And it just gets your beers out to a potentially new audience and a little bit further afield every time.
Yeah, exactly. While we do supply bottle shops and things all over, it's often our beers are on the more niche side of things. They'll probably get put in the sort of shelf things, and it's for us to sort of pop up in the list and someone say, oh, well, I'll give them a try, and it's nice. And again, it sort of encourages me to make some more accessible beer now and again too, which is always good.
But if people go on wildernessbrew.co.uk, they can see quite a range of stuff. But what have you got sort of in the pipeline for the next sort of 2-3 beers maybe?
So I've got a little rosette with Nelson that's in at the moment, but I need to can at some point, which is tasting really nice. So it's a saison yeast, a little bit of Brettanomyces, so it's super dry, but that works quite well with the sort of white winey vibes from the Nelson. 3.5%, so just keeping it nice and light. So that'll be coming out soon once we think of a name for it and some artwork or something. And then we're bringing back an old favourite of ours, which is our table pale. 2.5%. This time is going to be hopefully fully UK hopped pale ale. Again, probably in 750ml bottles. Low ABV, really drinkable, interesting. But again, it's just sort of something super accessible for the summer.
I should tell listeners, I'm actually drinking one of your beers right now. This one is called No Room for Nuance, and it's a soured saison with Vic Secret, 5%. It's absolutely delightful.
What's it like?
When I opened the can, wow, there was a massive aroma. Really, it leapt out of the can. Really hit you around the face, even from a couple of feet away. But on drinking it, it's quite dry. Very easy drinking. Oh, it's nearly all gone. I've drunk it in silence without you knowing, and it's nearly all gone. So
You've just quietly just been supping in the corner without telling anyone.
Like you touched on before, it's just a little bit sour, just enough, just to keep a bit of an interest. There's something different about this beer. It's not just a pale beer with Vic Secret in it. There's other stuff going on as well.
I'm terrible at describing the beers, but I feel like sort of explaining or feeling like having to apologise for them a lot and saying like, there's a lot going on.
No, don't apologise for that. That's great.
Yeah.
That one has been barrel aged, so it's sort of, it has got some funk, it has got some sourness, but then we dry hopped it with the Vic Secret, which I really think sort of helped freshen it up a little bit, sort of keep that drinkability.
So you're also kind of appealing to people who might not usually, with this particular beer, who might not go for this style of beer. If they're more used to drinking IPAs, there is something here for them as well.
Yeah, hopefully. There does seem to be, so sort of in the UK market, if you want a sour beer, it's super sour. Or if you want a sort of mixed firm beer, it's really, really funky and super sour.
You're kind of straddling two different areas with this particular beer to appeal to two different audiences, if you want.
Yeah. Like, hopefully it's interesting enough for the mixed firm nerds. That's not, I'm definitely a fully paid up member, but like drinkable enough that other people can also.
Definitely.
And like, how do you get into mixed firm stuff if there isn't anything?
You've got to have something that gets you into it, haven't you? You can't just go from, I like drinking a 6% pale, now I like drinking a barrel-aged mixed fermentation saison. Like, there's got to be some way in between, hasn't there?
Yeah, and also like that mega funky sour barrel-aged thing, that's not what you want every day. So internally, I guess we have a sort of a vague idea whether something's going to be almost like a special occasion beer or like an everyday beer, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think there is space for sort of that mixed firm stuff in the everyday beer. My inspiration was like lots of the Colonel Bière de Saisons, the hopped ones, and these days sort of Burning Sky do a Petit Saison in cans, which is amazing. So there is sort of this sort of drinkable mixed firm.
Do you think people shy away from the sort of mixed firm style? It's something they've never had and they're a bit worried to go near it because it might not be for them?
Yeah, totally. And we met at the Craft Theory Festival at the weekend, and there are a fair few people saying, "Oh, it's saisons. I don't like saisons."
Exactly, yeah.
And that's fine. I
Did you convince anybody?
I certainly got them to have a try. Whether they would have come back. I'm not sure. People are in general curious and willing to try things, but also you don't want to force them to have stuff that they aren't going to enjoy. That's not the aim of the game either. And that's why one of the reasons I'm really rubbish with the descriptions and on the beers, and why Helen's been taking that out of my hands. But I've always felt like I want to be really, really upfront with what a beer is, so that if people are drinking it, they haven't been conned into it, thinking it's something else. I guess what I want to avoid is people buying it and then being disappointed.
Nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse, is that if you put your heart and soul into making this beer, and it's gone through that huge process of sitting in a barrel as well, and then you sell it to somebody who just says, "No, I don't like it," because they didn't understand what it was.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with people not liking it or not enjoying it. Like, if we all had the same taste, that would be so incredibly boring. I feel like if sort of Rioja barrel-aged sour doesn't sound like it's going to be your sort of thing, there's a good chance it isn't. If there's an opportunity for you to have a taste and see whether you like it or not, great. But, I don't want someone spending sort of £12-15 on a bottle of beer only to not enjoy it. That sort of seems like a waste of everyone's time.
What a refreshing outlook.
Yeah.
Can you tell I'm not good at the business side of it?
I think it's just realistic, though, because when you were talking there and I was listening, I was just thinking, the way you're describing Saisons, and I think it's right for the UK market, it's a specialty. And it's a specialty in that you've got to not coerce, but you've got to sort of show people. And then because it tastes of more than one thing at once and another thing, it's not going to be to everyone's taste. But that's okay.
Like almost all the beers we make, regardless of the style, they are generally vaguely based on sort of traditional European style beers of one sort or another. They are liked by humans. They might not be for everyone, but this sort of flavour profile has stood the test of time with at least some people.
I feel as though I could sit here all day chatting and listening.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, our stuff, while it might sound a bit out there, in general, I'm not really going for super extreme flavours.
I had the collab that you did with Beer Riff in Swansea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so the one we brewed at theirs was a sort of Belgian-style wit, so like a wheat beer with coriander, orange peel, and grains of paradise. But then we brewed sort of a different beer at mine, which was a Berliner Weiss, so like a lightly soured.
Yes, that's the one that I had there.
And we were serving it. Yeah, we were serving it at the weekend with a shot of Woodruff syrup in it.
Dave,
yeah.
I didn't tell you about this. Yeah, so he was serving this beer. So I had this beer in Swansea at Beer Riff. Then at Craft Theory, he was selling it with a shot of this syrup, and you put the syrup in and it turned it green.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
And my wife tried it. She really enjoyed it, didn't she? She liked
that. yeah.
But I've never seen anybody add syrup to a beer.
No, but I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So Woodruff is the real traditional thing. So we imported some, and it was cool, right? Like,
did many people try that?
Yeah, we got through so much of that syrup. I was
really
amazed. Yeah. People really liked it. People liked the novelty, but again, like it's a flavour profile that it might not be for everyone, but it's been popular in Berlin for a long time. So like, there's got to be something to it. And it was right up my street. I tell you that. But I would say it's right up the street of about 40% of the people that tried it. I would say
that's not bad.
No,
yeah, the other lot sort of slunk away and
smiled politely and
more
walked off.
approachable. Yeah.
That guy gave me a green beer. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Well, I think for people listening to this who always think that your style of beers aren't for them, I really think they should give your beers a go. Have an open mind and let the beers do the talking and try and convince them that they can enjoy your style of beers, because I know from the ones I've had, I certainly have. Dave's got some on the way to him, which I'm sure he'll enjoy as well.
So excited about this box now. Like, really, really excited. I really hope it's where I think it is, where it's been left. I know what my day is going to be tomorrow, spent trying to find the box.
Searching for the box. People can drop in at the brewery, can't they? Monday to Friday, 10 till 4, is it?
Yeah, that's about right. Because it's sort of just me there. If I pop out, I guess there's no one there, but we have a tiny little shop, but generally I'm just working there so people can come in, have a look. If I'm doing anything, they can come and watch or have a taste of something, or, we're very relaxed because because I work on my own, so I get very lonely. So people come in, try and pop in, and then like 2 hours later, they're like trying to edge out the door.
Can I go now? No.
Yeah, so people can also go onto your web shop as well.
Yeah, that's right. We're happy to ship all over the UK.
And also there's the bruiser option as well. I don't know about you, Dave. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I could keep going for ages. Hopefully, people can probably tell it's been really engaging. It's been really interesting, and I think it shows that there's so much depth to the scene within the UK that you can have this now. Maybe a couple of years ago, craft beer was at the point where it was just like, well, if it's hazy and it's an IPA, that's enough. And now it shows it's probably evolved enough that we can get exciting beers like this, and people want to drink them, and it's great that people like yourself want to make them.
Look, we've really enjoyed talking to you. We're going to drink more of your beers, and hopefully we'll catch up again with you at some point in the future. But for now, the very best of luck. I think Wilderness are going places, Dave.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're new to the podcast and you don't quite know what to expect, on each and every episode, we do have a feature called Tried and Tested. And that is where we tell you about our favourite beer since our last episode. And we encourage you to do the same as well. So if you've been enjoying drinking something, let us know on our socials. Now, I've been enjoying drinking lots of beers, as usual, obviously.
Chocker.
Goes without saying. But rather than a single beer, I'm going to pick a brewery I've been enjoying drinking, and that is Dolphin Brewery from Reading. Now, Andy from Dolphin is a big fan of the podcast, which is obviously fantastic, but he does make wonderful beers as well. And he brewed 4 beers especially for the Craft Theory Festival I mentioned earlier. Went down there, made a beeline for Andy there with his 4 beers, and I wanted to try them all, and I did try them all pretty quickly. And he specialises in sour beers, and they were excellent. Each one actually tasted like you'd expect it to. A rhubarb one tasted like rhubarb. The pineapple tasted like pineapple. They were superb. Each and every one of the 4 were excellent. So much so we bought 3 of everything he'd got in bottles to bring home with us, currently in one of the fridges. So looking forward to getting through those. And the good news is that Andy is joining us on the next podcast to tell you about those beers and how he got into the craft beer scene and what the future holds for him. So, excellent stuff. Dave, over to you.
Went to one of the places in Ipswich where you can get, traditionally, you get a lot of good cask called Fat Cat. There's a few branches. You've got Fat Cat in Ipswich. You've got Fat Cat in Norwich. I want to say you've got Fat Cat in Colchester as well. Might be making the last one up. But you've definitely got a Fat Cat in Ipswich. And that's where I went. And anyway, more importantly, the beer I had was Oregon Calling version 1, which comes from Three Blind Mice, a brewery who are based in Cambridgeshire. I've had a few of their stuff in cans as well, very good. And I remember when we were back in lockdowns, places were doing takeout. Fat Cat did takeout, and they did takeout of a Three Blind Mice beer called Juice Rocket, and it is exactly as its name suggests, really juicy. If you see any cans of that, I would highly recommend it if you like your sort of sessionable New England pales. This is also a pale, 4.8%, American style. Now, they've described it as a West Coast. I would say it was very hazy, quite murky in colour, but it didn't taste very Westy at all to me. I thought it was lovely and fruity, and it was so good I had 2 pints of it, so it must have been good rather than me moving on to something else. If you like your sort of 4-5% hazy, juicy beers, you'd do a lot worse than to track down some Three Blind Mice. I'd say they stack up very well against a lot of more illustrious competitors.
Hey Dave, do you fancy some jazzy music?
Always.
Oh, we do love this. We don't hear it often enough, do we?
We will do. We're going to get through it. I mean, it's going to take a long time. That's the beauty of the series, though.
This is One Hop Wonders, our 3rd edition of One Hop Wonders, where we take beers with just a single hop in them, one single hop, and see what they can do. We've done Citra, we have done Mosaic, and we are now on to Simcoe, arguably one of the most popular hops on the craft beer scene.
Yeah, Simcoe seemed the logical choice. if you're listening to this podcast, you probably like your craft beer enough that you know a bit about hops, or if you don't, you'd like to know a bit more about hops. Or essentially, you take an interest in what is going into your beer. And Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe form a major part in, I would say, 95% of craft beer, if not more than that, I would say.
A huge amount, yeah. And what I found interesting with this is that I found finding Simcoe beers much easier than finding Citra and Mosaic beers.
Interesting, because I did not.
Oh, well, wow, okay, that's interesting.
No, I didn't. Citra I found really easy, and Mosaic, and I don't know whether I just wasn't looking in the right places. That's perfectly possible. But Simcoe I really struggled with, and I thought it'd be really easy as well.
Well, to level with you, I just went and looked in the fridge, and I found 3 straight off. That could be a reflection on my beer purchasing habits, or it could just mean that Simcoe beers are more prevalent. I don't know.
Or that you like Simcoe more without even realising.
Could be. One of the things we do with this feature is we never know what each other's got. We like to keep the suspense right there until the last minute. So, Dave, what have you got? What are you going to be drinking first here?
I did use these already for...
I think I know who this is.
Yeah, go on.
It's going to be Arbor, isn't it?
You are correct.
But they do such a great range of single hop beers. It's hard to ignore them. This is one of the things they do. So I think it's perfectly fine.
Now, I've just got the straight Arbor Simcoe, which is the gluten-free single hop ale, 4%. At the moment, also available from Arbor, if you wanted to amp it up a bit, is all the Simcoe Ladies, which is a great beer name, which is a double dry hopped IPA using Simcoe, which is a bit stronger. I think it's in the 6-something bracket. I have had that. So for the purposes of this, I didn't go for a beer I've already had. On the back of my can, they say hoppy Simcoe pale with distinct citrus and pine flavours and aromas. And that is, when I think of Simcoe, I think it's going to make a beer colour-wise, it's going to be sort of that deep orange colour. And it's also not going to be hazy in my head. It's more see-through. It's sort of grapefruity, quite bitter. What about you?
The thing with Simcoe, it's used for 2 things, for aroma and bittering, which is pretty much what you just said. Here's a good one for you. I've asked this question before on the previous episodes of this. When do you think Simcoe was first used?
97.
Ooh, not too far out. 2000.
Now, I feel like this would have been a major US hop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much.
And that's why it sort of lends itself to that West Coast style.
Yeah. If you Google Simcoe hops, what you'll find out is that it's become one of the most popular hops for both craft beer and home brewing because of its bittering qualities and aromas of stone fruit, pine, citrus, zest. Probably the ultimate dual-purpose hop in that sense. And it's particularly good at standing out on its own and being used for single hopped beers.
Well, I've just cracked my Arbor one and I can see why. I mean, this isn't sort of new in the sense that I knew what I'd expect, but even when you still get it, that nose is instantly Simcoe.
And one of the great things about this feature, which I really enjoy, is that we have so many beers that have got a mix of hops in them. And when you can just drink a beer with that single hop, you can really get to know that hop well and then identify it in other beers.
See, when I drink a beer, if it's got Simcoe in it, for the most part, it always comes in at the back end. But actually on its own, this has got a bit of quite a cereal-like quality.
That is so strange. Right, I've just poured my first one out, which is, I'm repeating the dose here as well. I've got brew by numbers again.
Ah, nice.
And this is Simcoe India Pale Ale, number 5. Poured it into the glass, and what I got straight away was like a cereal smell to it.
And my Arbor tastes like it as well. There's that sort of... When you have a bowl of cereal and you have that taste towards the back end, which is sort of almost a bit of the grain, not quite bitter, especially not if you've got something that's covered in sugar, but it is that sort of cereal grainy taste.
As long as when I go to the toilet later, it doesn't smell like sugar puffs, we'll be fine.
Well, my Arbor isn't doing anything unexpected. It's quite nice. I would say if I was buying this or I was drinking this, not for the purposes of this sort of research, in inverted commas, and
we do love research,
I wouldn't be loving it.
Okay.
It's okay, but if I was actually going out and I was buying beers, I wouldn't probably buy a single hop Simcoe, to be honest. That's not really the kind of style of beer I like. I like Simcoe when it's used within stuff. I don't know if I'd go out specifically to pick one. What about you?
I think I would. If I saw it and it looked and sounded like a beer I'd like to try, I would. I wouldn't be put off by it being a single hop Simcoe beer. I really don't think I would.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't think I'd necessarily put off. Say it was a brewery that I really liked doing one, I'd certainly give it a whirl. And that's no knock on Arbor. I do like Arbor. I think they do some really good beers. And I'd actually say of the two, if you are sort of wanting to get a single hop Simcoe beer from Arbor, or in general, if you want to sort of do what we're doing and see what you get from single hop Simcoe beers, and you happen to see all the Simcoe ladies from Arbor, try that instead. That's a better beer. That's really quite nice.
I think Arbor have done a great job with these single hop beers and introducing people to what you can expect from a single hop. You know, I've drunk a few recently and quite enjoyed them, and it's a learning curve, isn't it? You're learning all the time. Got to say, this Brew by Numbers number 5. Once you drink it, that cereal aroma has gone, and it's given way to a rather nice beer, actually. It's only a 330ml can, which is perfect. 6% this is. It's quite strong, actually.
That is quite strong. Mine is, so I'm on the other end in terms of both size and strength. So I've got the pint, because Arbor do pints, which I do think is great, and long may that continue. I know we've talked about...
It's interesting because...
smaller cans for stronger beers, but I don't mind that for a...
That is interesting, because that pint measure... previously had put me off Arbor. Just because it's a lot of liquid to get through. And I so rarely drink a pint in a pub, it's mainly half or 2/3.
I'd rather this wasn't a pint. But anyway, this is a pint and it's 4%. And interestingly, you said that cereal flavour went for you. If anything with this, it's getting slightly stronger.
And it sounds like that's not what you want.
Personally, no. It's just not quite for me. It just makes me want to try the other Simcoe beer I have, which I'm quite excited to show you.
So just before we go on to that, does that beer you've got, though, fit the bill of what we should be expecting from Simcoe, in that it's bright, citrus, grapefruit flavours, earthy undertones? Is that all there? Is it all going on?
I feel like I got a little bit lost with that sort of cereal taste of this. There is some citrus, and there is some sort of piney earthiness. Maybe when I say cereal, other people would taste it maybe as earthiness. So yeah, it is there. It's probably faded a little bit as I've got further into it.
Right.
The initial nose and everything, I was like, oh yeah, that's Simcoe. And then as I've had a bit more, it's leveled off a bit, and it's sort of just become a bit of a sessiony pale.
Okay.
But it would still have a distinct taste. I'd still know that wasn't a Citra beer, for example.
Yeah, well, I was going to go on to that. Would you be able to identify what that was?
I think I could give it a good crack blind.
I think this is harder to identify as a hop on its own than, say, Mosaic or Citra.
When you say that, I'm now thinking that rather than moving on to the next hop, which people are more than welcome to suggest which hop we go for next, perhaps we get a single hop Citra, single hop Mosaic, single hop Simcoe, and we do some blind testing. And we'll do that for an episode and see how we fare.
That could be fun. Yeah, that is a good idea. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, that's always good for a laugh.
I am determined to beat you, because in these head-to-heads previously, I have an appalling record, but I want to beat you. Right, what is your next beer? Because you do look excited about this one.
Well, I thought if I'm going to try and do not only Simcoe, but just sort of, broaden my horizons somewhat, let's combine the two. I've got a sour.
Woohoo! Little Earth Project.
I have got Little Earth Project's Simcoe Sour, a dry hopped golden sour. Well,
massive plaudits for going into uncharted waters there, because I know sours aren't your thing, but they're brilliant. Oh, man, I want some. I want to reach in the screen and get some.
Now that, not that the Arbor wasn't, but that is how I think a Simcoe beer should look.
Right, yeah. Almost golden in colour. Marmalade.
Yeah. Yes, marmalade is a great description. Absolutely. This is, wow. So Brewed in the before times in February 2020, this golden sour was left to age for 11 months before we added a helping of 2013 Simcoe hops. So there's a lot of age in this.
Wow.
And bottled it 3 weeks later.
So 7-year-old hops.
Yeah. Well, 9-year-old hops now, technically.
Well, now, yeah.
Yeah. While you can imagine there isn't much benefit to dry hopping with aged hops, they have added a light fruitiness and tannic character to the pronounced stone fruit flavour, think apricots and peaches, that come through via the Brettanomyces in our mixed culture. Left to age further in our bottle store until release, it is mellowed into a real easy drinking sour with very minimal intervention. And it's best before November 2026.
And I cannot tell you how jealous I am right now.
Okay, so nose-wise now, it's not really Simcoe. Mainly, I suppose, because of what I've just described has gone on with this beer. It's very tart and sour on the nose. But really funky as well.
One of the points about this feature is to showcase what you can achieve with a single hop. So you've gone from what you described as just a pretty average pale ale to something at completely the other end of the spectrum, even though the hop is the same.
Absolutely. And you know which beer I would have again?
You're going to surprise me by saying that one, aren't you?
Oh, 100 times out of 100.
Awesome.
Now, I think it's because this is probably, as much as it says it's a sour, it's a bit farmhousey, which I love.
I imagined it would be, yeah.
But it's amazing that this is what Simcoe can do as well.
Wow, you've come a long way, Dave. I never thought we'd see the day when you'd willingly grab a sour off the shelf and then enjoy it as well.
I'm really pleased. If sours can be like this, as well as the sort of, I can do the whole fruit sours, which we sort of talked about with your sort of Vault City and your Staggeringly Good and things like that. If they can be a bit like this as well, then I've been missing out on another sort of little subculture of sours.
I think so.
What I now get is the pine and the grapefruit and the citrus, but it's not sour, which might be because of how this has been brewed. But they're the bits of the hop that are coming through now to go with this sort of farmhousey taste. So it's sort of a grapefruity. If I was being really basic, which is really unfair because it's not a very good description of what is a really good beer, I'd say it's a grapefruit saison, but it's not even that.
So you're getting far more out of this beer than the previous one by the sounds of it.
For sure. Yeah, this adds quite a lot of layers to what I was getting out of the Arbor beer, but it's a completely different process. So it's probably a bit unfair to sort of, you can't directly compare the two, but
what strength was that
great.
What strength was
it's not that strong, actually. 5.2, and it actually tastes a bit stronger than that.
And did you get that when you went down there?
I did not. No, this was available on a web shop when I was doing an order, trying to find Simcoe beers, and I got them both from the same place. And I saw this, and I thought, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'll go for it, because Little Earth actually, they're local to me. And if you are in that area, which is sort of near Long Melford and Lavenham, going out that way in Suffolk, and they're in the middle of nowhere, but they are well worth a visit. I think I've talked about them before because I did get to go to the pub where they're based earlier this year. If you do get the chance to go there, I'd highly recommend it. It's a lovely setting, summer or winter, works equally well, and really, really interesting beers.
I want that beer.
Oh, I feel yours is a bit after the Lord Mayor's show now. What have you got?
Well, this is what is really interesting, because your first one was the 4% one. Mm-hmm. Then I had a 6% Simcoe. Then you've had that sort of farmhousey take on Simcoe. And what I've got is a double IPA brewed only with Simcoe.
Oh, okay.
So we really have covered the whole gamut here. And this is from Oh Brother Brewing from Kilcool in County Wicklow in Ireland.
Where on earth did you find Oh Brother Brewing?
It was in the fridge. I've no idea where it came from. I've no idea how long it's been there, but it was there, so perfect. Now, Oh Brother Brewing, as the name suggests, is run by brothers. There's 3 of them, Barry, Brian and Paddy O'Neill, and they've been going since 2014, actually, so 8 years, so they're quite well established. This beer that I've had in the fridge, 8%, Simcoe dipper. Let's pour it out.
Your fridge is like Narnia.
It is a bit. Now, this is a completely different colour to the previous one. This is much paler.
When I think a dipper, having had one earlier tonight, I think, unless it's a real West Coast dipper, I shouldn't be able to see through it. Now, I would say you can probably
You can see a little bit through this.
Yeah.
Holding its head very nicely, got to say. Bubbles sticking to the side of the glass and all that. But yeah, it's not maybe as thick as I might expect.
Now, I've got an idea of what this might smell and taste like.
Wow. This cereal thing is there again, because I'm getting that cereal smell. It's really interesting, isn't it? I bet we haven't drunk that many single hop Simcoe beers before.
No, I don't think so.
And that is why we're having a little bit of trouble with this
I wonder if there's perhaps almost a reason there's not that many Simcoe beers. Perhaps it works better in tandem or sort of as part of a supporting cast rather than being the star.
The difference here between this and the 6% brew by numbers Simcoe I had is that cereal thing is there on the nose, but then follows through into the taste as well.
A bit like what I had with the Arbor.
Yes.
Now, interestingly, I thought when you got this, it might go quite West Coast, especially as it was 8%, and you might get more sort of a toffee apple type thing.
And the piney element of Simcoe. Well, there's still time for that to happen. Isn't it interesting, though? We've got 4 pretty much completely different beers here, created with that one hop. Yeah,
which nothing else suggests that Simcoe is very versatile.
Presumably that is the reason why so many brewers then use it with other hops, because it is so versatile.
I think, sort of casting my mind back as we're talking, and obviously we said we're going to do this blind tasting, I think I'd be quite confident of picking a single hop Simcoe now we've done this.
Yeah, and me.
And I think if anyone at home is listening and either has done or are doing sort of similar, I think you'll really spot a Simcoe beer in the wild. They really stand out.
I'd be much more confident now than I was 10, 15 minutes ago. I think we've learned something there.
Yeah, I'd say of the 3, it's easily the most pronounced. Of the 3 we've done out of Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe. We'll find out. But I think if you have the 3 lined up, the Simcoe one should be probably the easiest to pick. I think you can muddle the other 2.
It's quite different to the other 2, isn't it? That's the thing. Well, if you've experienced single hop Simcoe, let us know what you think, and how does it compare to Mosaic and Citra that we've already done in this series. Be really interested to hear your take on it. Keep listening for when it does pop up in the future, when we have 3 different beers side by side. We go head to head and see who can get the most correct. What does the winner get?
Ooh, I reckon the winner gets to choose which hop we do next.
Yeah, okay. I'll go for that.
Get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Daftaboutcraft1.
And now it's time for Hype or Tripe.
Hype or Tripe. And I reckon the most featured brewery in this section of the podcast must be Cloudwater. And here they are again.
If anyone's going to help us for this section, it's more often than not Cloudwater, who just will chuck out big beers, but
often
also
very good beers.
Worth discussing, yeah.
Like the chocolate orange one, which was awesomely good, wasn't it? I can still taste it now.
Yeah, I still go back to that. That's all it takes. I can still go back to that beer.
Yeah, that was excellent. So we hope this is going to be as good. What is it?
So we have a tipper.
A triple IPA.
Which is called Big Fish, Little Fish. And it's actually not a straight Cloudwater beer. It is a collaboration. And it's a collaboration with Time and Tide, who've actually never had a mention on this podcast, which is a bit unfair. One of their beers is called Ham Sandwich, isn't it? And that's a really nice beer.
Yeah. And I had a little look at their web shop, actually. They've got quite a lot of different beers in stock. I might be sort of tempted to go and dip my toe in there and have a few if this is good.
Well, the reason the 2 have collaborated is this is part of the Together Again series. And so Cloudwater launched this at the back end of last year. And it was sort of in response to COVID and everything that's gone on with that, I believe. And it's just an idea of getting together with some people and just doing some collaboration. So they teamed up with four breweries to do this. And Time and Tide obviously won. Then you've got Chain House Brewing, Hops and Dots, and North Riding. They're the 4 that they teamed up with to do this series. And obviously we have the Time and Tide offering.
Cloudwater are very good at this sort of thing, getting involved with smaller breweries. You know, when their beers famously went into the supermarkets, now not there anymore, they collabed with various other breweries to get them into the supermarkets as well, if you recall. So yeah, they're well known for doing this sort of thing. Right, let's crack this open. So do you know where the name comes from, Dave? Big Fish, Little Fish?
Well, when I think of Big Fish, Little Fish, I think of the Big Fish, Little Fish cardboard box dance.
Yeah. You know, Bob the Builder had a big hit with that.
I think he ripped it off, didn't he? I
think he did.
I don't think he was the original.
I don't think Bob did the original, but he did do a version of it, yeah. You're right. All right, now, I'm really pleased with myself because, I should have mentioned this earlier, I got a whole load of my glasses. As you know, I'm very fond of craft beer glassware, and I've put them all through the dishwasher on a glass setting, because often glasses get put into the dishwasher with other stuff, and I've noticed that they're not always as clean as they could be when it comes to tasting these beers, because you can sort of get residue in there, don't you, off other stuff going around the dishwasher. So I've cleaned a whole load of glasses on the glass setting in the dishwasher. So hopefully I should see that there's no little bubbles or anything anywhere. No, there isn't. Excellent. So this is looking great in the glass.
I want to say that's really sad, but I'm quite excited for you.
I
I understand where you're coming from with that. I can imagine the satisfaction.
I put about 30 glasses in the dishwasher and I was so pleased with myself knowing that they're going to be in tip-top condition.
Kind of makes me want to do the same now. But
Yeah,
anyway.
you will.
So we've got a big juicy tipper, and it's got a light finish showcasing dank Idaho 7, as you have your first sip. I haven't had mine yet. Pineapple juice Eldorado, and soft citrus New Zealand Cascade.
I think you will like that.
It's quite dank,
Yeah.
I would say. I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all.
What I'm glad is it's not sticky, sweet, sickly tipper.
It's not that overripe fruit thing, is it, at all?
It almost sort of fizzes on the back of your tongue a little bit like a boiled...
Very, very smooth and full.
Very full, yeah.
Were you saying it fizzes a bit like a boiled sweet?
I was going to say that, yeah. Do you get any of that, or is that just me?
I think I sort of know where you're coming from with that.
I did have a boiled sweet earlier, so maybe that's in my mind.
I had a boiled sweet earlier as well. I've been having rhubarb and custard.
Nice.
I love it. Anyway, we digress again. Okay, so I get a lot of Idaho 7 because I think that's pretty dank. I don't get masses of Cascade, but I do get a bit of citrus. So I think that's sort of maybe the lighter touch with it. I'd say of the hops, I'd probably get least of the... I think it's there in the colour maybe, but that Eldorado pineapple-y, I don't know if I get loads of that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I think I do, actually. I think I do. Although it's the usual thing of because I know it's there, am I tasting it because I know it's there, or am I really tasting it?
I do like it. I've got no complaints with it. I'd say it actually tastes 10% as well.
It's very soft, and I think it does taste 10%. That first mouthful was very pleasant. I didn't think it was 10% with the first mouthful, but when you go back for another one, then you can really taste it.
Just as I've had a couple more mouthfuls, Cascade's kicking in a bit now, just on the end. It's getting a bit more bitter. It's strange because they've said it's big and juicy. Now it is, but it's also not, if that makes sense.
It's like we were talking about earlier with those big hazy juice bombs, isn't it? This isn't... This is big and full, but it's not a juice bomb.
No, and I think that's where we are now with perhaps beers like this, that you don't actually get... That was why Moot's offering did really feel like a throwback, because it was big and it was juicy. This is big for sure, and I think it's juicy. It's juicy in 2022. It's not juicy for 2020. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It's the new juicy.
So like, does fizz. Not as many O's or S's in it.
This does fizz. I've done it again. It does fizz on the back of my tongue. In a nice way, it's not sort of it's not off orange juice that sort of fizzes when you drink it. It's not that sort of thing. It's good. No, I like it. I'm a big fan of that.
I like it. It's probably one of those. It's very easy. I could probably get through this quite quickly.
Probably regret it later.
I think it'll then kick in about half an hour's time. But yeah, definitely hype. No problem with that. It delivers exactly what it says. It is well thought out. It's a good tipper. It shows actually probably a bit of refinement in tipper as a style now. Because
I mean, the whole beer scene is always changing, isn't it? You know, but this isn't the kind of tipper you would have drunk 2 years ago, is it? It's very different.
And it's also as we've sort of discussed anyway, you don't get that many of these now. Not everyone is chucking out a triple IPA or messing around having a go at a quad. The quads were a bit scarcer for sure, but a triple IPA, everyone was doing it for about 3-4 months, weren't they? It was like everyone was going to have a go at it. Now, not so much. I mean, the big stouts, they will still keep coming along. People like those, but the big IPA, the really sort of going beyond 8.5%, I don't know.
I tell you what's really interesting. You've said this to me before, that people run scared of high ABVs, and I've always thought, really, do they? Went to a party recently with our neighbour, friend of the podcast, Jason. Hope you're listening. There was some guys there, and one of them, he was looking at. I took some beers round. He was looking at these beers. Wow, 8%. He couldn't get his head round an 8% beer. I thought, you should look at this one. It was a 16.5% stout, and he just couldn't believe it was stronger than his wine, and he was very scared of it because he quite rightly thinks it'll knock his block off. I sort of explained that, you just have a little bit, not the whole can. But a lot of people, and I've learned, like you said, do run scared. So presumably tippers out of our circle don't have a big appeal to people.
No, probably not, I suppose. Although it makes no sense, especially when you say about using the wine as a comparison, because you don't down a glass of wine particularly knowing it's 14%, do you? But it's a 14%, but it's because beer has that sort of stigma, and that's what you associate. But you're going to keep drinking it, and you can drink it easily. So as soon as it's got a chance of getting me drunk off one rather than like 6, that's difficult.
I guess a lot of people like to have a beer and have another beer and have another beer, and when they realise a beer's 10% or whatever, it's, oh no, that's not for me. All of a sudden, a bit dubious about it, and maybe that idea is infiltrating the craft scene more and more, in that we don't want to drink big beers because you can't drink many of them, and we often want to drink for quite a long time and experience lots of different flavours and tastes and lots of different beers. Yeah,
and I think, as you say, the scene's evolved. So what was considered quite sort of daring and a bit different, where you're going, well, look, this is a double strength IPA. It's 8%. And everyone go, oh my God, like an 8% IPA. It's unheard of. Now that's quite normal. So what's actually interesting now is, okay, well, what hops are you putting in your IPA, and what flavour am I going to get out of this beer for 5, 6, 4, 3%? I think that's where I see the scene as now. And your bigger beers, they're great. They still absolutely have a place, and they're not novelty, but they've become more just, as you said, I suspect they're probably not that big a sellers.
Although, having said that, I noticed that this wasn't released very long ago, and you now can't get it on Cloudwater's shop. But that's slightly different, because Cloudwater obviously have a real hardcore, strong following, and people will buy these big beers from a well-respected brewery like Cloudwater.
And credit to them as well, there's usually a bit of thinking behind it. It's not just, we wanted to brew a big beer. Like, for this one is part of a series they've done where they're bringing other breweries to the fore.
If you can get hold of it anywhere and you see it in your local bottle shop or online somewhere, I would say absolutely go for it. Share the can with somebody, but go for it, because hype all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you see a can of this, I think it's probably going to cost you about £8 to £10, but it's worth it. And as Dave says, it's a great sharer. This is what these kind of beers are designed to be and what they're good at.
Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
You have been listening to Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. Our episodes are released every 3 weeks, so the next one will be available to stream and download from August the 1st, and we'll see you then.